So, could you say something about the place of development or becoming or maturing in relationship to the person's ability or capacity to sustain a relationship or identification with the impersonal awareness?
I think the maturing affects, if you will, the body mind. And in other words, it's a incremental transformation, increments by increments, of the way we think and of the way we perceive the world and the body. And the way we think, I mean, what we believe. In other words, what we believe to be, what we feel to be. So these are the two areas that are affected during this stabilization process, which takes place increment by increment, each increment being triggered by a glimpse of our true nature. And in the beginning, if you will, the glimpses are perhaps distant in time and don't generate a big change, apparently, in most cases. And then, prior to a glimpse and after a glimpse, the glow of presence starts to linger. At the same time, the glimpses become more frequent. And then there is, each glimpse is timeless.
Yes.
And in the beginning, there is almost no glow of presence before, after the glimpse. Then, before and after the glimpse, there is a glow of presence that lingers. Over time, this glow of presence lingers, and then there is a form of continuity that gets established. So the glow of presence means the perfume of our true nature in the presence of thoughts and mentations and sense perceptions, bodily sensations. Mm-hmm. So then there is a continuity of worrylessness, if you will, with sometimes there can be relapses into ignorance, but these relapses then are of less frequent, and then they don't last for as long.
Yeah.
They may be triggered by external events of that then will there are some very secret, very deep nooks and crannies, you know, in the body-mind structure where some residual belief systems are hidden there, and some external events sometimes will open the doors of these closets. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, because if you are happy 99.99% of the time, it's for all practical purposes as good as 100% of the time. There is no big difference.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Because when we are in ignorance, we are, and often without acknowledging it and without knowing it, we are miserable 99.99% of the time, always seeking something, always expecting something. You see? So to move, the move from 99%, let's say, from 99% of the time being miserable to 99% of the time being happy is the consequential one. The move from 99% happy to 99% to 99.99% happy, this residual 1%, if you will, is not it's not really consequential.
Yeah. I appreciate what you are describing as an organic process, as opposed to some teachers describe it as like turning the channel on your TV. It's like, it's there, that's who you are right now, just go there, be that.
That's true, that's true, that's a glimpse, that's a glimpse, but the question is that also a glimpse of our true nature, although that a glimpse of our true nature changes the parameters in the body mind.
Mm-hmm.
A glimpse of, as a metaphor, when the moment you understood the true nature of Santa Claus, that it was mom and dad, that changed your behavior. Because instead of writing wish lists that you would put in an envelope and put on the fireplace, so, and then the next morning the envelope had disappeared, and the explanation was Santa Claus took it. Now you don't have any longer to write wish lists and put them in an envelope in front of the fireplace. You just ask mom and dad, oh, could you buy me this doll or this truck? So it triggers this understanding about the true nature of Santa Claus, changed behaviors of yours. There are things that were useless, that you don't do any longer. Same thing here. A glimpse about understanding our true nature changes some behaviors in us, and other behaviors don't change. You drive the same way, you speak languages the same way. That doesn't change. But every behavior that was triggered by compulsive fear and desire, this behavior changes drastically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Not only the behavior, but the feelings in the body and the thoughts in the mind that were associated with it, that were in fact the origin of this type of behavior. Mm-hmm. Yes, the body mind is tremendously affected over time in the stabilization process by our direct experience of our true nature. Yes, and it is true that this experience is available right here, right now, and that it has always been the case. We have always been the same universal awareness. That's very true too. Mm-hmm. But there is no contradiction between the direct path, which is this understanding that we have always been this universal awareness, and the fact that on the level at which there is a body, there is a world, there is a mind, on this level, this direct understanding brings about a transformation. And so often this very simple, the view that of non-duality that stops at simply the understanding you are universal awareness is from expressed either by speakers who have not had this experience really, and who are just kind of repeating some purely logical understanding of the type, if A is true, then B is true, but not having the experience that A is true, or by people who have had this experience and as a result has transformed their lives, but because they didn't belong to a tradition, they were autodidacts, right? They self-taught, and they thought, okay, that's what it is, right? I have realized the truth. I'm still miserable in my life, but so be it. I'm still there. And in their case, this relief will be only temporary because they will get relieved only when they go back to their glimpse of their true nature. But their experience of their life as a human being will still have this sense of lack most of the time and this seeking of I don't know what. They would just have these moments when they go back to the glimpse, when they say, oh, what was I doing? And then go back to their ignorance. So that's a difference, if you will, between true Neo-Advaita, meaning Neo-Advaita that is taught about by teachers who have had a genuine experience of non-duality, but because they didn't belong to a tradition, they have not used the tools, the clever means that enables them to get established in this, stabilized, in this tranquility.
Thank you.
Francis?
Yes?
Hi, it's Caitlin. It's funny on my screen, I see somebody else's name showing up. Anyway,
That's always the same.
it always says Linda? Oh,
No,
I'm like, oh, that's strange. Okay, I
there
don't
is
know what happened.
there
It's
is only,
Caitlin.
there is only one being, Caitlin.
Perfect,
Many
okay.
faces.
So I've been experimenting with seeing the world as a sensory playground. And this human experience, it's not so much of an experiment because it's actually the truth. Everything I'm experiencing is coming through the senses, but I've just been really enjoying the simple things like eating a piece of fruit or walking in the forest and just being pretty amazed that this is my experience. And from this perspective, I see, well, first of all, it really highlights what you always say about the celebration. But the other thing I had an insight about was that my reality has to be the one that's perceiving all of these wonderful sensory experiences. That's the bottom line of it all. And then my kind of philosopher mind went to, okay, that's my human experience in this earthly realm. It's wonderful, it's beautiful, the joy of being alive. What if we, just take away planet Earth, take away the humans, and what is left? Is there still perceiving, or is that when we say it's more just like, then there's just being? I've been doing this my whole life. I want to imagine what it is like without the Earth.
It depends what you call perceiving, because are you talking about perceiving of objects, or because the answer is very easy. If there are no objects, there is no perceiving of objects.
Mm-hmm.
But the other question is, if there are no objects, can there be perceiving? And if yes, perceiving of what? And the answer is yes. In the absence of objects, there is still perceiving, and it is perceiving itself. Awareness being aware of itself. What is this experience like? Well, there is no time there, but it is eternal. And it's like absolute happiness. It's like absolute intelligence. It's like absolute security, because there is only you as reality. Nothing can affect you. There is nothing else that could possibly affect you. And it feels like love. So the noumenal experience has all these qualities and many others of love, intelligence, gratitude, eternity, reality, compassion, mercy, whatever. And that remains over in the absence of objects. But we don't have to wait up until the end of the body to open ourselves to the possibility of this experience, because in the transition between two perceptions, we are there. In a moment of understanding, we are there. In a moment of love, we are there. So this experience of pure awareness is not something foreign to us. It is simply something which is denied on the conceptual level, because this experience is inconceivable. That something cannot be conceived doesn't mean it doesn't deny the reality of it. So try to conceive understanding, for instance, as an experience. As an experience.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can conceive of understanding as, okay, I try to communicate that to this concept, to this friend, and Paul obviously didn't get it. That's a representation, that's a conceptual representation of understanding, relating what that Paul didn't get it, however, Peter got it. So Peter understood, Paul didn't. So that's an objective concept of understanding, but that's conceivable, yes. But that which cannot be conceived is our experience when we understand. Because precisely when we understand, at that moment, no concepts are present, meaning no concepts, no thoughts are present. Nothing is present at the moment when we understand. Take the understanding of a word or of a thought. In order to understand a thought, a proposition, the thought has to be finished. Because unless you have finished the thought, you cannot understand an unfinished thought. So the thought is no longer present when we understand it. And we cannot formulate our understanding of the thought in words or otherwise. Through laughter, for instance, in the case of understanding a joke, we cannot express our understanding of a thought without before having understood it. Therefore, understanding takes place after the perception of the thing, whatever it is, which we understand. So the thing which we understand is no longer present. And before we express in whatever manner, language, thought, laughter, reaction of the body, our understanding. Therefore, our understanding takes place in the absence, in this interval, in which the mind has defined experientially as phenomenal perceptions, is not present. In this moment, there are no phenomenal perceptions, there is no mind. We, however, are present as the understander, meaning as whatever it is that stands under what? Under the perceptions that we understand, under the thought or under whatever, the event, whatever. So we as the understander are the continuum that bridges everything that appears on the surface. The waves on the surface are not continuous, they are separate. The waves of perceptions and of expression. We are the depths of the ocean that stands under, that understands. So it is an example, if you will, of the experience of the pure awareness. And the ultimate form, if you will, of understanding is when you understand what I've just said. Because what I have just said and what is there to understand in my words is not like understanding a joke about the Pope or about whatever. Not at all. It is about understanding itself. So that's the highest form of understanding, is understanding of that which understands, or understanding of the reality of understanding. That's the highest form. That's why Atmananda Krishna Menon was making a distinction between ordinary reasoning that relates, which is thought, that leads to the understanding about those thoughts of the type used in science, engineering, daily life, matters of law, etc. And higher reasoning, which is the same application of thoughts and the ability of the mind to think, but in this case applies to understanding itself, or awareness, or reality, if you. So it may seem to you that my answer went very far from the question, because the question was more or less, well, now the world is present to me and to this awareness, but what is the experience of awareness in the absence of this beautiful world? And what I'm trying to tell you is this, is that you already have this experience, because the very fact that you are sensitive to the beauty of the world, the experience of the beauty of the world is not the same thing as the experience of the world. You understand that?
Yes.
So then, what is the experience of the beauty of the world if it is not the experience of the world? And moreover, if the experience of the beauty of the world is not the experience of the world, is the world necessary to have the experience of the beauty of the world? Well, since when we experience the beauty of the world is not present, how do we know that at that moment we are experiencing the beauty of the world? Is it not possible that at that moment we are experiencing the beauty, not the beauty of the world, the beauty? So we have the world, and then we are touched by the beauty, what we call the beauty of the world, but the world is not present. So what we are experiencing then is beauty itself. But there is no time there, you see. And then the world might still be present. And we have the best of both worlds, if you will. We have the world and the beauty of the world. Now, evidence of what I said is that if the beauty of the world was in the world, every time we experience the world, we should be experiencing the beauty of the world. Obviously, it's not true, because many people have every day the experience of the world without the beauty of the world, right? And we have had this experience, we know this experience. Therefore, it is obvious that the experience of the beauty of the world is not the experience of the world. And when we experience the beauty, because the world doesn't need to be present, it may be present, but it doesn't have to be present. We were touched. It's a form of understanding. So the same thing I have said about the thoughts that disappears when we understand, the sound of the symphony disappears and leaves us in this. And then the sound is there, continuous and new variation. And then we are still in the beauty. And then we realize that all the sound celebrates this beauty. So the experience of the beauty, the sound, the images, the world don't need to be present, but they may be present. And then we are in our true nature, you know, we are in the realm of beauty itself, and whatever appears in it is just a celebration, constant creation coming out of the universal mother, you see, of all things.
Very, very clear. Just want to comment on a few things you said. So, sometimes I feel like you talk a lot about looking at the evidence, and sometimes I feel like I don't necessarily need or look for evidence in the traditional sense of what I would think of as evidence. Like, for example, when I'm just listening to you now and you talking about the understanding, and there's just something in me that gets it, but like you said, I can't conceive it, but I understand what you're pointing at. Or the same thing you're talking about, the beauty, when I'm in the world and it's just, I know it's not the world, I know it's the experience of myself enjoying the world. Is it really important to go looking for?
No, we are all different. Because when I say look at the evidence, I mean look at whatever evidence you have that you as awareness are separate and limited.
Okay.
But that applies only if at that moment you feel separate and limited. If you don't feel separate and limited, why would you look at the evidence? You know, it's like if you're happy, what would you bother looking at the evidence that you are not miserable?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I find my I think I understand more, or I, for lack of a better word, I advance on the path when I just feel like, you know, Cupid's arrow in my heart, sort of like that. And then, like, yeah, there's those moments of understanding, and it's hard to talk about.
And we have to understand that these moments of understanding have lasting effect. In other words, we remain in this understanding. After a glimpse of truth, we remain as truth up until we decide otherwise. So we can remain as truth for very, very long periods of time. So it's not that we need a new glimpse. You know, that would be a mistake to seek a new glimpse. If you're happy, don't try to fix it by looking for something else, a new glimpse. No. The glimpse is simply a point of entry into the Garden of Eden. Once you are in the garden, there is no need to look for another point of entry. You are inside, enjoy it. Enjoy the zoo.
Yeah, I am more and more and more. And the moments of unhappiness seem to be shorter and shorter. Um, and then one other comment on that, everything you just said. At the very end, you said, oh, I can't repeat it, but something about the constant creation. And this is something else I was contemplating as I was, you know, enjoying the world. I was seeing my reality as that which is perceiving all this, but then I had the thought that, well, there's also, it's not only perceiving, there's also creation happening like simultaneously.
Exactly. It's just imagine that when you wake up, you realize that you were the creator of your dream,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
this cosmic dream is the same. In order to enjoy it, you have to forget that you are creating it. Because if you know that you are creating it, how could you enjoy being surprised by it?
I see. Yeah, it's just
You
less
get what I mean?
obvious, you know.
I mean, remember as a child how we enjoyed something new happening, you know, a distant uncle or cousin visiting, you know, and bringing things from a different place, from a different country, you know, different type of chocolate or a toy or whatever, you know, and or just something new happening in the street, you know, someone having bought a new car or someone having an accident, you know, and paramedics coming, you know, and the police. And so it was very exciting, something new, you know. So
Yeah, I still enjoy surprises quite a bit.
yeah, so if we knew that we are creating it, I mean, what's the point of it? You cannot enjoy it, you know.
Okay.
So that's the beauty. We create this kind of vehicle, human body mind, kind of drone or computer bio-robots or something like that, to just walk in our creation while we are at the same time creating the robot in order to enjoy it. It's a really extraordinary adventure and to be surprised, like in our dreams. So that's why perceptions and creation although they appear simultaneously, of course, in this timeless presence, the creation part is kind of hidden from the perceiving part. Only there are certain moments when we understand it, when we see it. But most of the time, Maya, the rules of Maya require that we don't look behind the curtain to see what the magician is doing, because then it eliminates the joy of the magician's show, the enjoyment. We have to, although we know that it is a trick, although we know that we are being, that the magician is a trickster, right? If we knew, if we were magicians ourselves, we wouldn't enjoy it in the same way as we do when we look at the show with the eyes of a child, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty. If we knew the trick, then we would become technical and say, oh, here, no, I could see the card, you know, it was not perfect, you know. Who would be a magician? That is boring.
Yeah, that would be boring.
It's different. We know it's a show, right? That's the beauty of it. But we enjoy watching it and being surprised. But whatever is coming out of the heart, you know.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And so it's really not worth like investigating into this side of creation.
Only if there is a sense of lack, or only if for some reason you find it interesting. Some people enjoy doing it. But if you're happy, you know, content, and if it would be boring to do why fix it? If you're happy, there is no need to fix it. So the two reasons for the investigation are just if you feel a sense of lack, or if you enjoy it because you find that it is fun to do that.
Peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, because you know, some kids are like that. Some kids they want to know, so they want to catch the magician red-handed kissing the girl that he has sewn in two parts 2 minutes before.
Oh, thank you, Francis.
Hi, Francis.
Yes, David.
Hi. First of all, it was a beautiful conversation. There were a couple times younger, I sort of had glimpses of behind the curtains and the mechanics. And so I always wanted that, and I'm still driven by the enjoyment of it, but it's nice to hear that, you know, we don't need to be constantly compelled or obsessed by it. That's beautiful. I wanted to ask you a question about something that's I'm experiencing recently and maybe get your input or feedback on it, if that's okay. I'm facing some potential medical issues recently, and I have a cluster of symptoms. They may be nothing, but together they could be something more serious. I won't know for a little while. We have very basic health insurance, so it takes quite a long time to get appointments and get in. So, you know, I've got this waiting period going on. I also have a history of seizures, and they've diagnosed, they won't call it epilepsy, but they'll say I'm seizure prone. So I've had maybe a dozen and a half big ones throughout my life and smaller ones. And I have this thing what they call an aura. So it's a very uncomfortable, very bizarre experience that happens that precedes the seizure. And I've also had anxiety throughout my life and sort of panic attacks. And actually a couple of them have led into what became a seizure because the symptoms are so similar. So they can't actually trigger that way. So when I get anxiety, I get this thing called, they call it ictal fear, or a fear of having a seizure. And, you know, lately I'm doing this research into my symptoms and the possible conditions, and I try not to overdo that. But, you know, sometimes I get this, I'm almost panic stricken when I'm reading about it, like it shoots up my back and goes into my shoulders. and it causes a great deal of discomfort. And then, of course, like the fear of a seizure comes in. And I know that underlying the fear of a seizure has to be the fear of death. You know, I mean, besides it being highly uncomfortable and unusual, I know that that's still there. And so I kind of wanted to ask, you know, when I'm having these experiences, I mean, is there anything other than recognizing once and for all that as awareness, the death of the body is not the death of me? I mean, is that when one's having these experiences or these attacks, is there anything one can do, like stare directly into it and face the terror? I just was curious if you had any input about that, not medical advice, but advice on dealing with, you know, that kind of fear when it comes up.
Yes, I think the more we get accustomed with the experience of pure awareness, which is in a sense the experience of the unknown. But there are two definitions of unknown. One is unknown to the mind, which it is, but not unknown to itself. So that which was and still is unknown to the mind has become known, more known to itself. So that this fear of the unknown, because the unknown has become known to itself, disappears, and I think gradually, as the leftovers of this fear in the body-mind, Christian, please, yes, thank you. As the leftovers of fear leaves the body-mind, there is something, for instance, if you go into anesthesia, and they put the thing in your, and an interesting test to run is, well, I may not wake up from that, just to think that, and to feel perfectly at peace when they inject the stuff in your system. That's a test to run, and I'm sure you will see a change in your attitude if you compare what it may have been, I don't know, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. You may feel this peace. In other words, although you go into the unknown is unknown to the mind, but not to yourself. So you remain within yourself, no matter what. So there is this peace. Difficult to express it differently, and the same thing happens if something difficult in your life appears in a difficult circumstance, that after a period of restructuration of the body-mind system as a result of this change, the piece of the background comes back. It never leaves you. So perhaps, you know, I know that convulsions, I mean, may be very, very unpleasant and very painful, very unpleasant. I had an experience myself when I was 14. I was in Germany and we were playing soccer in the shower room of a public swimming pool. And as I shot the ball, I fell on the back of my head. And before I became unconscious, the body was convulsing. And that was a very, very painful experience. Then I woke up in the hospital. But so I can see that there is this resistance to pain, you know, because if we know that it's going to be painful, I don't know whether your symptoms are similar to what I experienced on that day. But
It can be painful, yeah.
Or extremely unpleasant, whatever.
Highly uncomfortable, yes.
Highly uncomfortable. So that we have some natural resistance of the body almost. But I think we could do away with the psychological resistance to it and accept that that's what the condition is, and that possibly that would go a long way towards alleviating, you know, the adverse effect of this negative approach to it. And utterly, it's ultimately, you know, acceptance of our death, acceptance of total acceptance of the unknown, and total acceptance of the disappearance of the known as phenomenally known. There is this knowledge that when everything disappears, everything phenomenal disappears, that's not the end of everything. You see, that's I mean, I'm always saying the same thing. I'm saying it in a different way here, but that's really the most important aspect of it.
There was a time when I was going into a situation, I had a medical thing go on, and I knew I was probably going to have a seizure, and that fear was there. But when I was able to say, you know what, I'm going to have a seizure, and that's okay. Like, those experiences were so much less distressing when I was able to accept it. Yeah, I just didn't know, like, when the fear comes. So a lot of my tendency is to distract myself, you know, just to instantly find distraction. And I was wondering if that was maybe like kind of running away from something that I could look into.
Perhaps on the other hand, if you focus on what's going on in the body with a secret hope to preventing it, then the secret hope of preventing it from happening, it's also counterproductive. There is a fine line in this, allowing the body to do what the body does. Trusting that the body, given its condition, is going to have to know what to do to face the issue. Okay. Inherently, we have to trust the vehicle. An airplane pilot, you know, he trusts the plane. He trusts the plane, and so he's with the plane, and like a rider trusts the horse, is with the horse as the horse moves, right? If the rider tries to fight the horse, it's not good.
Mm-hmm. That makes a
It's
lot
a
of sense.
form of harmony.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. I think that's going to be helpful to me. Thank you, Francis.
Francis,
Yes, Judith.
hi. Could you enlarge on what you just said about the restructuring of the mind and body that occurs after some very bad news, let's say, about someone close to you or your own body or whatever, before the background of peace returns?
Yeah, because we have to adapt to the new circumstances. And
What restructuring goes on?
if we are not attached, the restructuring remains purely practical. Because if there is no psychological charge, the restructuring is purely practical.
But what
But
are you trying to,
nevertheless,
sorry,
well,
what are you trying to restructure?
your life. Let's say an example. A divorce takes place.
Yeah.
And
Have one of those, yeah.
and so if all the psychological aspect is not present, practical questions remain. What do we do with the children, if there are children? What would we do with the house?
Oh, I see.
What do we do then that I am on my own? How do I reorganize my life? All of
Yes.
these things. I mean, it takes a lot of practical reorganization, for instance.
Yes.
Right?
So it's restructuring of almost circumstances and
Yes, adaptation to circumstance, realization, and that things are now different.
right. Yes. Yes.
And but if all the psychological aspect is out of the picture, if you understand, well, the divorce happened, it was simply we lived together for 5 years, whatever, 5 months, 50 years, I don't know. And it was meant for each of us to go through this experience.
Absolutely.
The relationship, it has been, in fact, to the mutual benefit to understand our flaws, our whatever, you know,
Absolutely.
then we move on. The future is bright, you know, the past is bright too, you know, and as human being, I understand. I have to have a compassion and to a lot, you know, and to be fair in this process as much as I can, etc. So then everything would be hopefully smoother. Not necessarily, because the person may not share your understanding of the truth, and may have demands, you know, that are unfair. So how do you do? You know, then there might still be residual disagreements.
Yeah. And I think we kind of got away lightly, considering a lot of pain. But years before, I was interested in truth.
But if you don't have the psychological burden within you, it will still optimize the process. Because even if you have, let's say, instead of having a very friendly separation, if there is at some point some adversarial process, because you are not psychologically involved in this adversarial process, you just take whatever steps you deem necessary. For instance, if there is contention about who gets the children, And let's assume you feel that the other person is totally unfit, you know, and nevertheless, the other person wants to harm the children. And you feel that in your absolutely fair assessment, it's not really in the interest of the children to be with the other party full time. That, yes, it's okay for them to visit, but that you are in a much better position to secure. And let's assume there is a conflict, there is a legal battle, and you'll have to go to the battle. You know, that's the case of Krishna and Arjuna. You have to go to the battle. But at the same time, you do what you feel has to be done in fairness, including fairness for the other party, right?
Yeah.
And you may lose this battle or you may win. But ultimately, you take the steps to win. But if you lose, so be it. It was out of your hands. You see what I mean? So you have this peace of mind, which in ignorance you wouldn't have had.
Yes. Yes. Thank
So,
you. I understand what you meant now. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Francis,
yes.
I have a hi. This is my first meeting, so I have a question about just the kind of glimpses that I've been getting. So I have quite severe depression, and although when I'm in these meetings, these types of meetings, I a lot of understanding comes through, and there's some release there. The glimpses that I'm getting are mostly my ability to kind of let go of the really heavy depressive thoughts. And they happen very rarely, but they are happening a little bit more. And I'm wondering if I'm on the right track with this, or whether I'm using it as kind of a comfort blanket to make myself feel better in an intellectual way. I don't know.
Because we will have to go a little deeper in what is meant by depression. Because depression may be unrelated to, partially related to, or exclusively related to the belief to be a limited awareness. If depression is exclusively limited to the belief to be a separate awareness, then no medical doctor, no psychologist can help you because they don't have, unless they are truth lovers, they don't have the answer to your questioning about the nature of awareness. If the depression is partially related to the belief that awareness is limited, which I call ignorance, then there is a partial solution to your problem that can be found here. But the rest is usually in the hands of medical doctor.
Yeah.
And finally, if your depression is totally unrelated to the belief to be a separate person, then what you can find here is not going to help you. Having said that, my recommendation in case of depression will always to follow medical advice or to have it investigated, because often depression can be due to situation, condition, physical condition of your nervous system or of your body. Sometimes people have depressive episodes after an infectious disease. Women after giving birth, for instance, is another example. So perhaps, but that's not my field of expertise. There are also other conditions that may be of a genetic origin that get are hidden during the early childhood and then came to the surface with adulthood. All of that has to be investigated with some physician, you know, and I'm not at all against symptomatic treatment with medications, provided you find a doctor who is intelligent and who is a good listener and not a systematic prescriber, who can assess the necessity of or the non-necessity of such a treatment, and who will help you, guide you in the process of finding the right molecule and the right dosage. But you know, all of that is totally out of what we are talking about here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have a great psychiatric team that I work with. Medication hasn't really helped me so much. So for me, it does feel like it's much more on the kind of quote unquote spiritual side, where this deep longing comes from and this deep pain of feeling separate. That for me, intuitively, that feels much more like it's what's happening. Yeah, which is why these teachings really speak to my heart, and I think almost saved my life in a way, in the sense that, yeah, just the truth of them. But I guess my quote unquote progress is very slow, and I still have very intensely despairing days. But I guess it's just about staying on the path and keep
Let me
going.
ask you a question, because you can self-assess whether you are in case number 2 or even better in case number 3. In other words, whether seeking the truth potentially could bring about a partial recovery or a full recovery. You can do this assessment in hindsight after several years of being interested in the truth. See whether you are better off now than you were, let's say, 4 years ago. Whether you see a well-determined change in you, in the change in the frequency of the relapses, in the duration of the relapses, and whether you feel in you that the little candle of hope is burning brighter. You see, these are the factual elements that would that you could use as a benchmark to make this assessment, whether you can expect in most cases, for those who are like you, articulate persons, in most cases, it's not case number 1. In most cases, it's case number 2 or case number 3. In other words, there is hope, at least for a partial and significant improvement as a result of this interest for the truth.
So sorry.
Look, what I would look for is, I don't know for how long you have been in the direct path. I wouldn't count in this time assessment the time spent on other paths, New Age, mantra, meditation, all of the yoga, all of that stuff. I would start counting the time since you have become interested in non-duality. And for you to see, after make an assessment at 6 months, at 1 year, and at 3 or 4 years, and see whether first you notice a big change in your life without being able to assess whether it's for the best or for the worst, but a big impact. That would be a positive sign, actually, in my book, a big impact, that all of a sudden things start moving. But then in the long run, you should find a convergence towards a disappearance of this episode or the rarefaction of those.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll check back in at some point. Thank you, Francis.
Hi, Francis.
Hi, Amna.
So I have a few questions following up the last 2 conversations. The first one is regarding mental illness.
Yes.
So let's say somebody's on the direct path, but they have like a medical condition of schizophrenia or whatever. Could they find happiness and peace?
Are they interested in the truth?
Let's say they are. So it's more like, how does mental illness like play with the direct path or being interested in the truth? Like, can you have this mental condition and still like know who you are and not be affected by it?
Well, all I can say is that it is for me obvious that there are forms of mental illness that are either genetically or acquired through the development of an individual that are physiological in nature. And these are dysfunctioning of the dysfunctionment of the body. And right now it seems that science doesn't have too many tools to cure those, and that's the tools, but I'm not an expert. So I am speaking out of and please, the MDs who are here online, correct me if I say things that are. It seems that most of the tools are just symptomatic treatment with chemicals. And the goal is to make life more easy, more comfortable. However, in addition to the discomfort, which I just mentioned, which is of a physiological nature, there is often another discomfort, which is due to ignorance. The ignorance-related depression is the widest spread disease on the surface of the earth, because 99.99% of mankind is in ignorance. So as a result, they are all in depression. They would claim, no, I'm not, but in fact they do. So to that extent, even people with chemical imbalance of the kind I was mentioning, in addition to the discomfort which is inherent to their physiological condition, they also have this ignorance-related suffering. And often, this ignorance-related suffering is kind of made worse by their physical condition. For instance, a child who was different from the other children because of such a condition, the parents who were in ignorance may have tried to be demanding or to have expectation on the child and to make mistakes that have kind of reinforced the suffering in the child. Because of the particular condition the child was in, and as a result, have made things worse. So this nurture-related part of the suffering can be alleviated if there is interest in the patient for the truth. Because seeking the truth is not related to anything there is no marker of a truth seeker, no genetic marker, no psychological marker of a truth seeker. It's a mystery why someone becomes interested. And it seems that It is spread almost uniformly across all demographics criteria, races, genders, ages, levels of education, levels of health, ethnicity, nationality, level of culture, etc. Truth lovers pop out everywhere out of nowhere. So also among those who are subjected to this type of disease, we can call it condition, medical condition, there will be truth lovers. And their seeking the truth will partially alleviate their suffering. And hopefully they will find also the right type of medication, the right type of procedure that will also help on the other side, because there is also such a thing as serendipity.
So it's kind of like having a physical illness, like diabetes or something. And
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And it's important for us to understand that when we face these people, when we have to deal with them, we have to be very careful when we deal with people to project onto them our own experience, and especially not to be demanding or not to assume that people have the same interests as we have, or that people have the same abilities as we have, intellectual faculties or type of expertise. We often blindly made such assumptions, and as a result, create problems. The rule of thumb is, as much as we can, try to see the situation from their vantage point. Try to understand where they are coming from. It's called love. Because love is mostly the ability to understand the other. There is no difference between understanding and loving. Loving is just the application to understanding to the other person. Understanding the so-called other is love. Love without understanding is not true love, and you know, it's not. That's why mechanical love, institutional love, is not love. Love is really something that happens from human being to human being. It's not love by institutions. That's why we have to be careful in our life that not to make love a concept, but to make it an experience in our life. And of course, it relates to understanding.
When you say institutional love,
Theoretical love, institutional love, yeah.
what do you mean by that?
Love on the paper. Love, yeah, we are going to put people in this nursing facility and we are going to feed them in this way, and we are going to organize their lives in this way, in this way, in this way, and then we are going to do this and this and this. And there is a mechanical militaristic form of love. which is not loving, which treats people as objects. The difference why medicine, for instance, is called an art, at least in France, I don't know here, and not a science, is important because of this relation between the physician and the patient, which is part of the healing process, normally.
Thank you.
Francis, can you hear me?
Yes, Steve.
Okay. It's been a very odd morning for me hearing all these things. I've dealt with depression for many years. Yesterday, I just had a huge life change for me, and as you know, I've been more of a truth seeker, I guess, than a truth lover because of how I look at the world. My mom died yesterday.
Oh, sorry
and
about that.
thank you. And you know, I've spent maybe 40 years with a sense of futility about life, and it's really hard to let go of that perspective. And I'm not even sure what to ask you here. I just feel hopeless. And I know this is all Steve's belief talking. I'm not even sure what to ask. I just feel sort of lost after all these years talking with you and previously other teachers. And many times I don't feel like I'm in any different perspective than before. I have occasional glimpses, but the overall thing hasn't changed. And most of the time I'd rather go hide from my own perspective and tune out, because it's just the reflex to go hide from things, because I guess it's the projection of future of the pain is just really strong. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, you have to navigate through this stormy waters up until it dissipates the storm.
Yeah.
It's a change. It's a change in your life. It's a change. Your dad is still around.
No, he died when I was young.
So then there is this feeling that you are alone.
Very much so. Very much so. I've been very distant from my mom for years, and we just started reconnecting. And then she started having dementia, and then she got COVID and all these other things. I'm not close to my sister, so the sense of aloneness is very powerful.
Yeah. But
A sense of the world isn't benevolent to me, you know?
well, the benevolence of the world is often there is this story that my friend Ivanama was telling. In the story, it's an Indian story. It's Krishna who is traveling throughout India with a close disciple. I don't know whether it's Arjuna or some other guy. Anyway. And as he travels throughout India, he visits disciples of his. And this particular disciple happens to be a king. So as the news that Krishna is coming to visit the king and his entourage takes the road to the border post of the kingdom where Krishna is going to show up with the elephants, the musicians, the dancers, you know. So Krishna and the disciples arrive, and there is this big celebration. They are taken to the palace, and there are lots of festivities. And then, after a few days, Krishna and his disciple go on the road again. And as they cross the border of the kingdom, Krishna looks back at the kingdom and says, "This king is a very dear disciple of mine. He treated us with utmost respect and love, and he's very benevolent to his subjects. He's a good king. I want to do something for him." And so Krishna made some mudra and says some mantra, and instantaneously, all the possessions of the king get multiplied tenfold. 10 times more elephants, dancers, musicians, food, palaces, etc. And the disciple says, "Yes, I can see, Master, that you did the right thing." And then they move on, and the next disciple there, they pay a visit to. The picture is quite different. The guy lives in a very tiny hut, miserable. And outside, there is a cow. And the cow doesn't have very much to eat because the land is very tiny. And so the cow is very skinny and doesn't produce much milk. And the disciple, knowing that Krishna is coming, goes to the border of his little lot to welcome the guru and welcome them in the hut. So they can sleep in the hut. In the meantime, he sleeps outside, and he gives them a bowl full of milk of the cow. And the next morning, after having had the breakfast with the bowl of milk, Krishna and the disciples go on the road again, and as Krishna crosses the enclosure of the lot of the disciple, Krishna says, "This disciple is very sweet. He loves me, and look, he gave us almost everything. He gave us the milk, he gave us the housing. And so I want to do something for him." And so Krishna does the mudra, the mantra, and instantaneously the cow dies. And the disciple says, "Oh, Master, what have you done? I mean, the king, he didn't need 10 times more dancers, etc. And this poor guy, the only thing he had was the cow. And you killed the cow. Why?" And Krishna says, "It was the only obstacle that separated him from me."
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you,